Let's take a look at my top 5 Gelatinous Cube inspired D&D dice sets.
Varykino, living the Star Wars life.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Varykino YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be taking a closer look at my top 5 favorite Gelatinous Cube inspired dice sets for Dungeons & Dragons. The Gelatinous Cube is a classic Dungeons & Dragons sort of faux, monster, beast, whatever you want to describe it, and to me, I particularly like its iconic form in green. As you can see here, I have the Funko Pop vinyl versions of the Gelatinous Cube, the original one in green, and for the movie Honor Among Thieves, they put out a blue version. Personally, for me, I do end up preferring the green one, and for dice, I find it's actually a lot easier to find green skull dice inspired by the Gelatinous Cube than it is blue. So I decided I was going to set out and try and find my favorite green Gelatinous Cube inspired dice set for my Dungeons & Dragons games. So after a lot of internet hunting, I finally have 5 sets here in green. So I'm going to be taking a closer look at each set, the pros and cons of each set, where I got them from, how much they cost, and all of those sort of details. And I'll have them all linked below in case you fancy any of these sets and want to add them to your collection. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Number 1, this one is by the brand CNUAS, purchased from Amazon.com. It was described as D&D dice set, sharp-edged resin. It retailed for US $29.99 and it shipped from the US. So each of the sets came in different packaging. This particular set came in a branded black box with the name there in foil. I assume this is just a sort of a random company, the likes of which you'll find on AliExpress, eBay, and Amazon. Just, you know, not particularly a well-known dice brand, but just one sort of making mass-produced dice that you can find cheaply online. But honestly, this was the only one that I could find that had this very specific style of dice. I couldn't find it anywhere else. So it arrived in this black box with sort of a branded foil. It's got the Amazon sticker there of the item description. So opening it up, we can see each of the dice embedded in sort of a velvet foam tray here, which I thought was interesting. Some dice listings have a sort of a box or something like that as an additional add-on extra. I did not pay for this box. It was included with the purchase. So for $30 US for a set of dice in a box, I thought that was not too bad. So let's get them out and take a closer look at the dice. So these ones were described as a sharp edge set. Okay, some of these are a bit stiff to get out. There we go. That one's really in there. And oh, let's get them all out first. That one's in there. Okay, so very tightly in there. They were not going to budge during shipping. So we can see first off that each of the dice has a multitude of little skulls in there. So the one thing that I found while searching around for skull dice is the most common form of little skull inclusions in those dice. They're essentially little skull beads that you can find. So if you have a look at, you might be able to tell on the skull at the front, there is a little black hole at the top of the head. So that is for using the skull as a bead. So it's easy to take little beads and basically chuck them in the resin when they are being made. And so you get all these little skulls. So you can pretend that, you know, they were killed by an arrow or, you know, some other sort of fate that left a hole in the skull in there. So as you can see, because the inclusions, as with many dice, they tend to fall towards the bottom, so you end up with slightly more resin on one side and the skulls at the bottom. So that's fairly standard, you know, because just the way that dice are made. So the thing that I particularly noted with this one, silver font here with a line marking the 6, and the 4 is what I call a closed 4, so it ends in a point. So that was some of the criteria I used for differentiating between the different dice that I could see online, because I didn't want to trust the color of the green, because, you know, monitors and pictures are never quite a true indication. So this one has a closed 4, a line under the 6, which personally I find slightly more easily to read during gaming than the dots. So I do like the line marking the 6 and the 9, and I think the lettering is quite easy to read. So because these are sharp-edged dice, I was curious to see if, you know, in the manufacturing process, if they had any sort of dings or scratches from each other. I can see a few very tiny little marks, you know, when they've been sort of rattling around with others before being put into their box, but nothing too major. And I think that the detail, I can see the skulls pretty clearly. Sorry, I'm trying to keep them in focus in the camera. You can see, and I think the points are really quite sharp. I don't see any that are really quite sort of flawed or broken. We've got good resin to the points and good lettering. I'll take a closer look at all of the lettering to see if there's any sort of skipped ink or ones where it doesn't look like it's been filled all the way. You know, these fine points, I think it's really quite fun. You can see the skull is really quite well lined up there with the 1 in that corner, of course. I think that that's really quite fun. So I think these look really good in person. You know, some of them, the skulls look really quite close. I think they are really quite fun, nice and easy to read. Of course, with dice with inclusions, like these objects set inside, they might not roll, you know, mathematically true, because they're going to be slightly heavier on one side than the other. So, of course, they are just a little bit more fun and perhaps not the most fair when it comes to number distribution. But so that's up to you if that is going to be a sticking point for you. Then you'd probably get just more of a just a pure resin one rather than ones with objects in it inside. But I like that one there. You can just see him pointing up the top of the 11. So overall, I think this is a fabulous set to start off with. You know, this was the first one that I found in my online hunting. I liked the look of the green, I liked the look of the skulls, and it just felt like it was very Gelatinous Cube inspired. So I think we're off to a great start with this set from Amazon. The second set was purchased on Etsy from the store RainbowShopCN. It was described as a skull dice set, sharp-edged resin. This one retailed for US $22.09, and this one shipped from China. So again, first impressions, this one looks very similar to my first set. We can see that there are green dice, silver lettering, and skulls inside. It came in a Ziploc bag, and each of the dice is in their own bags. So yeah, let's dig in and take a closer look at these ones. Get them all out. So these ones were amongst some of the cheaper options I could find. So I'm really curious to see how these ones stand up to some of the other options. So I'm going to take them all out of their little individual bags. But that does help cut down on scratching in the factories. Okay, so I got the set all out of their little plastic bags. That took a little while, and again, I'm really enjoying this set. They use that same skull bead, so you will see the little holes at the top if they are sort of orientated in that way. But I think it looks really fun. We've got the green resin, silver numbering there, and if I find this one, you will notice that this one is what I call the open 4, so the top does not join up. So I knew that this was different to the previous set, that they're not coming from the same molds. And also the 6 has a dot instead of the line underneath. And I also think that the skulls on these ones are a little darker. If I can find one, it looks like they are more black than that first set. So they're quite ominous in the resin. And you can see on ones like this that they're all sitting at that lower half and the resin is more on the top. So again, they're not going to be the most sort of fair and true when rolling, particularly if this one here, the 20 on the top, the dice, the inclusions are all on the bottom of this particular one. So perhaps that one will roll 20 for you, perhaps a little bit more often, because that one is, we've got the heavier objects down the bottom. But yeah, I think that they look fun. There's a good amount of skulls in each one. The edges feel quite sharp, and I'm not noticing sort of too many flaws like a broken point, you know, especially on those very, very fine ones. I think these look very fun. Certainly a contender for one of my favorites. I think these look really cool. Set number 3. These were made by Crystal Maggie, available on Etsy. They are described as Mossy Skull Green Glitter Resin, retailing for US $48 a set. But you can often find them on sale for US $38.40, so you can get a good savings there. These ones shipped from China. As you can see, this set arrived in a black cardboard box. Some Etsy sellers have a box of some sort as an additional purchased add-on. This one came with the set. I did not buy this. This is how the set came. It's kind of got a bit of a sort of a decorative moon print here on the top. So that's kind of fun and safe for shipping. So let's open it up and take a look. So as we can see, this set has a very gold glitter effect to it. So I'm very keen to get these out and have a closer look at each of the dice. This is my first set that doesn't have silver lettering. So I'm curious to see how these ones will sort of feel, whether they'll feel a little bit more cube inspired or whether the gold is going to sort of throw me off a bit, because I do like the silver lettering of the other sets. So those are nice and easy to get in and out. So that might be a good box to keep for packaging. Okay, so let's take a closer look at these. So the first thing that I really notice is the different font here for the lettering. It's a lot more sort of, I guess just a little bit more flourishy. It looks quite fun. We've got some sort of extra sort of additional details to the lettering. These ones are, I can't tell if that's a 6 or a 9. I don't know if these ones actually have a mark or not. Okay, on this one, the 9 is marked with a dot, I guess, on the D6. They haven't marked it because there is no 9 on that set. So that's interesting. I often find that regardless of the number of sides, they still put a dot or a line to mark the 6. So we can see that. And the 4 on this one is an open 4, but very nearly closed, so almost it doesn't matter. So looking at the inside, this is a bit more of a yellow toned green set. We can see it's not quite as dark green as the others. And as the listing describes, that there is moss inside. I don't know if you can see that in there. And there are little flecks of glitter. You can sort of see here on the corner, there is like a flick of gold. Hopefully the camera is picking that up. So a little less sort of cube inspired rather than sort of more just sort of old skull sort of inspired, but I felt quite drawn to this design. I think it looks really quite fun. Some of them have more moss than others. You can see we've got quite a clump in this one and lots of speckles of glitter in there. I think that looks quite cool. It was kind of hard to find skull dice that had glitter in them. I do like sets with glitter. I own quite a few sets that have glitter in them, but this was one of the only sets I could find. There's like a really cool gold flecks in this one, skull sets that had glitter in them, so I thought they were kind of pretty. These ones are not quite as sharp. This one in particular is just a little bit more softer edged than perhaps some of the others in this set. This one's quite sharp. This one is just a little bit more of a rounded edge. Of course, this is mostly a pretty sharp-edged set. And the skulls in this one, if I can find one that will show it, are not black at all. you can kind of see this one has just one skull in it. So it's kind of giving me more of a traditional sort of like the Funko Pop vinyl figures with just sort of one unfortunate explorer on the inside. There is just one skull in, I think it's just one skull in each of the dice rather than multiples. So they tend to be a little bit more centered. And if I go through each of them, I don't think, like the D20, there is one sitting at the bottom, but quite a few of these, it is quite central. It's not sort of right up against the edge of the resin like some of the others, which perhaps gives it a more gelatinous cube effect, having that one skull floating there in the middle rather than just lots and lots of skulls. So I think that's quite cool. Of course, with one skull, inclusion, sometimes you end up with a little bit more plain green resin, but then of course a skull wouldn't necessarily be floating dead center in the middle of a gelatinous cube. So quite different. You can tell, you can see that black hole in the middle of the skull bead there, that these are beads, but these ones are perhaps a little bigger. It's a little hard to tell without direct comparison, which we'll do at the end of the video when I get them all unboxed. We'll take a look and see how much difference we can see. But yeah, that's quite different, and I'm quite enjoying the glitter aspect of this one. That's a really fun and pretty set from Crystal Maggie. Set number 4. This is by the brand Luffleberry. They were described as gelatinous cube sharp-edged dice. They retailed for US $37 a set, and these ones shipped from the UK. Luffleberry is a UK brand, but they do ship internationally, which I really like. So, as you can see, they arrived in this cute little green drawstring bag, and they also included their business card, which was a fun little touch. They have so many fabulous cute dice sets. I'm certain I'm going to be back for more, but I was really happy to find a dice set from a different brand. So I'm very keen to see how these compare to the ones that I already have. So let's jump in. So we've got this fun green bag, and inside we have a Ziploc bag with them all together. I'm a little bit nervous that they perhaps might have scratched each other, but to be fair, I didn't pay for any kind of additional add-ons. And unfortunately, these ones did take quite a while to get to me. But to be fair, that was during a time where the UK Postal Service was dealing with some severe delays. So that was not the fault of the vendor. So I'm really enjoying the deep colors, and I can actually see a fair amount of glitter in here, which is perhaps not as evident in the pictures. I don't really remember the glitter so much, but I know these things can be hard to capture on film. So again, this one has silver lettering with a closed 4, and the 6s have a line underneath it to denote the difference between 6 and 9. But these ones definitely, yes, they definitely do have a fair amount of glitter in them. And we can see that the skulls are quite black. And again, I can see those small holes. So these are the same sort of style of skull beads that we see across the range. That is generally the way that most dice makers are including skulls in their dice. So we have multiple skulls in each dice. They do tend to sink to the bottom of these sets. So you do get sort of a level where you can see a little bit here where they're sitting across the bottom, and there's mostly resin on the top. So again, they're not going to roll the most accurately, but they are certainly fun to look at. I really do like that glitter effect. I hadn't noticed that until I'm finally getting my own first-hand look at these. And I really like the vibrancy of the green, a much sort of darker green, but they look really cool in the light. I'm really quite enjoying that. Of course, the D6 is the classic sort of cube shape, so it's one of the best ones to really get a sense of how well those inclusions look on those flat surfaces. Very, very cool. So overall, I don't see significant scratches or missed paint, despite the fact that they're all packaged together. They look like they have arrived safely. I don't see any broken corners. I will be going over all of them a little bit more closely before I make my sort of final review at the end. This one, the skull is just kind of, there's a subtle, it's just on the edge of the green resin, so you can just kind of see the white peeking through the resin there. It's kind of set up against the side when it was poured, but it's like he's trying to escape and never quite made it out. So that's quite fun. So long as the skulls don't kind of destroy the corners by kind of stopping the resin from getting into all of the corners, I don't mind if they are quite up close. Makes them very readable. You can see on this one, they're all very quite smushed into that corner, and then we have more green resin here on the top. So very, very cool. Set number 5, old school dice. These ones were described as infused skull with green, retailing for US $17.99 a set. They shipped from the US. As you can see, this dice set arrived in a old school branded velvet drawstring bag, which is really quite fun. I think that is a nice touch, particularly if you want to take your dice to events having their own little drawstring pouch here. So they are a US-based brand. They do ship within the US. As an international fan, I had these shipped to my US mailbox, so they ended up costing me a bit more. They were actually the cheapest dice on my list, but because of that additional mailbox redirecting, they cost me a bit more. But for fans in the US, they will be the most affordable option on my list here today. So let's open up the drawstring and take a look inside at these dice. So, first thing first, I noticed that these are quite paler in tone to my other dice sets, and that is because they're actually a little bit more of a clear resin with sort of a smoky green swirl mixed through it, which is really quite fun. And these have black lettering, which is quite unique. We have a line under the 6, and the 4 is a closed 4. And we have sort of a paler beigey brown skull on the inside here. So overall, it gives it a much paler effect to it, perhaps more translucent for the sort of gelatinous cube, because you're not supposed to kind of see them in the hallway. So I do like the kind of the clear aspect. You can see across the top here. That is quite clear, and then we have that sort of more swirly green in the corner there, which means that we can see the skulls quite well sitting in the middle there. It looks like this is similar to, I believe it was the Crystal Maggie set, in which there is one skull in the middle there, rather than the little clusters of all the individual skulls. So very fun there. And a tiny little one in that one is so cute. You can see this one's actually got quite a lot of clear, particularly on that back edge. There's almost no color there, just a little bit of a swirl in there. So I thought that was a really fun sort of change up. So they clearly look green, but yeah, you can really see the skulls in them. So I thought that was a really cool way to sort of interpret a gelatinous cube. So as a bonus entry into my top 5 list, Old School Dice was one of the very few that actually offered a different color that I felt fit with the gelatinous cube idea, and these ones are a pale blue set. So they match the new Funko Pop vinyl from the movie. And there is a fair amount of gelatinous cube merchandise, like the statue available at GameStop, that uses blue, and certainly things like the Dungeons & Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves, the merchandise for that uses blue, like the action figure and things like that. So I thought it would be fun to have a blue themed version for my list. So again, we can see that this is a clear resin with a swirly sort of blue color in there. Blue lettering, we have lines under the numbers. and they are a closed 4 font. Whether the 4 is closed or open is not really a preference. It just helps me differentiate between all the different styles. And also, this is one of the few sets in my list that is not sharp edged. So if that is a thing that you prefer, having the ones that are sort of slightly rounded and smooth, they always feel quite nice to roll and to have in the hand. You know, they're not going to be, you know, quite as rough on the skin as the sharp edged. So if that's an important thing for you, these ones will be one of the top picks, I think, because they feel really nice with those kind of rounded edges. So there we have our 5 Gelatinous Cube dice sets and our bonus 6th blue variation there. So honestly, taking a look at each of them, I'm actually a lot more torn than I thought I would be. There are pros and cons to each of them. In terms of actual play, I do like the rounded ones. I like how sort of, you know, I can sort of fiddle and roll them around in my hands, but I'm quite drawn to the silver fonts of some of the other sets. But then these ones have sort of like a bit more of an antique look to them, the Crystal Maggie set with sort of the gold flakes and the gold lettering. So I think it's going to come down to a few things. I'll put up some images here. I will have them numbered 1 through 5, left to right, and I'll compare the D6s from each set. I think those are good because we can see a clear shot from that flat side, and of course the D6 is a cube. It's going to be the closest representation to a gelatinous cube out of the set. So here we can see from left to right, we can see the Amazon one, the Rainbow Shop, Crystal Maggie, Luffleberry, and Old School Dice. We can see how the fonts on these are all quite different despite the fact that they look the same. I think the fonts from Amazon's and Luffleberry's is the closest on the 4, but they're very different in terms of the internals. The color of the resin is very different, and the skull colors change between each one. First set has the beige brown skulls, then we have black, then we have beige again, then we have black, then we have beige again. So they've all chosen different approaches to making a Gelatinous Cube inspired dice set. Moving on, we'll take a look at the D20 for each set, because obviously that is the one, the iconic sort of classic D&D dice. So we can see again 1 through 5, left to right. So some of these dice have the skulls sitting on the 20 side with the 1 facing up, and some of them are reversed with the 20 at the top of what would have been the casting and all the skulls sitting on the 1. And personally, I like that best because I think if you roll a 1, you kind of want all those skulls facing up. You know, that is the worst roll. So I think the skulls in the top would be fun when you're rolling that. And some of them, the dice sit more, the skulls are more in the internal sort of dead center of the casting, and some are more sort of very much, they floated to the bottom or sunk to the bottom so that they're more aligned on one side. When they're resting up against the edge of the dice, you can see them clearly, but at the same time I feel like floating in the middle gives a more true gelatinous cube feel to it rather than sort of sinking to the bottom. And of course there is the option of, have I completely changed my mind and do I like the blue set instead of the green? I mean, I've got the option of both here, but yeah, there were definitely not as many blue skull dice sets out there. There were a couple that I considered, but I find that the skulls inside the blue set were often red. You know, we have black and brown here. The red skulls seemed a little too aggressive or perhaps a little more gory. With the blue, it kind of gave a slightly less gelatinous cube vibe for me. So I don't know if I'm actually going to pick a favorite here. I think I like Old School Dice for the feel in the hand, the 1 skull, the very easy to read numbers with the lines under the 6 and the 9. and just the way that they feel. They were also, strangely enough, the cheapest on my list. So if you really, really like them, you can always buy a backup set in case you lose one, or, you know, one just decides to be unlucky for you. But I can't get past the very, very pretty effects of some of the others, including Luffleberry and Crystal Maggie, that had glitter in them. And there is just something very appealing about the look of sharp-edged dice. So I will put up lots of closer up photos so you can see the details of each of these dice. Hopefully they'll show off their features and pros and cons, so that if you are looking for a Gelatinous Cube inspired dice set for your games, you'll be able to see which ones you like. I'll have them all linked in the description box down below with prices and links, so you can go grab one or more of the sets if you find a pair here that you really like. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this has been interesting and educational. I'm so keen to start playing with my dice and get a feel for whether these ones, it might come down to just luck. Which set does actually roll well for me in a game? And then it might be down to that. So I might do a lot of testing with my dice trays and figure out which one rolls the luckiest. After I do some testing, I'll put a note in the description box down below to tell you guys which one is the luckiest set for me after some testing. So thank you so much for watching. Catch you in the next video, and as always, may the force be with you.
If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like, check out our other videos, and subscribe for alerts about new uploads. Thanks for watching, and may the force be with you.